We're so glad you're with us tonight for what I am assured is going to be an amazing, amazing event and conversation. So without further ado, I welcome you, and I want to welcome our friends from Vote Common Good. Thank you so much for being with us. Let's welcome them. And how about we listen to some beautiful music, yeah? Let's do it.
This is a song we sing a lot when we're on the road. Reminds us that no one is free until all of us are free. And if you pick it up by the end, we hope you sing along. There's a world at war, caught in suffering, silent casualties. Oh God, grant us peace. In these sleepless nights, I can hardly breathe. Despite brutality, I know that we'll be free. I know that we'll be free. So let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All that love is us to see, we'll all be free, yeah. Let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All that love is us to see, we'll all be free, yeah, we'll all be free. Now we got a little part here that sort of needs a church choir. And I don't know if you're up for it, but it's real simple. I'm going to say free, you're going to say free, and we're going to say that a few times. It goes like this. We'll be free, 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 free. We'll all be free, and we'll be free, 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 free. We'll all be free, oh, we'll be free, free, free. We'll all be free, oh, we'll be free, free, free. We'll all be free. Let the light in, let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All that love is us to see, we'll all be free. Let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All that love is us to see, we'll all be free.
Tell your sister, tell your brother, tell your father, tell your mother, tell yourself, tell everybody, we'll all be free. Tell the lovers, tell the haters, tell the prisoners, tell the jailers, tell the world, tell everybody, we'll all be free.
Oh, we'll all be free. Yeah, we'll all be free. Oh, we'll all be free.
Hey, it is really good to be back with you all. I don't remember if we jump-started a little event a couple of years ago out in that other room, and it was one of the highlights of us being around the country in 2022. I'm really glad to be back. My name is Doug Pagitt. If we met back then, good to see you again. If not, we're so glad to meet you tonight. We travel around in that big old bus out there, and we do all kinds of events. One of the kinds of events that we're going to do tonight is a conversation about what do we do about the role of faith in our democracy. What's the role for all of us that our faith should play in a pluralistic, secular society that we live in? How are we going to move forward? What are we going to do with this? Our conversation tonight is going to have three parts to it. It's going to be little musical interludes in between. The first part, Robb and I are going to talk. It's actually going to have four parts. Robb and I are going to talk for a bit. That's going to be part one. Part two, we're going to bring up Alicia, Pastor Alicia, or Sister Kicks as we call her. And we're going to talk about what's a pastor do? How do faith leaders talk about this? Then we're going to have some people running for office talk about what does it mean for them to think about the role of faith in our democracy. And then the fourth segment is going to be y'all. What do you all think about how we engage with faith in our democracy? So that's how our night's going to go, and we hope that you enjoy it. My name is Doug Pagitt, as I mentioned, and this is Robb Ryerse, and we, along with the other people that you saw, you're going to meet each one of those singers here in a little bit. In the back, you also see Tim, and you'll see Beth back there, and you'll see Donnie. We're part of the team that's traveling together right now, and we're really excited about this conversation. This morning, we did an event outside at a park. We do events with candidates. We do public events outside. We do public access kind of promotional and protest events, all kinds of things that our organization does. But we're really excited about this conversation around faith and democracy and the question of what does it mean for us to engage as people of faith in a pluralistic society? How do we do it? Because one of the options is Christian nationalism. So the last time we were here, we talked about what Christian nationalism, the idea that the government and the religion join together with a singular cause. We think that's a really bad idea, a really dangerous idea. We'll talk a little bit about that in this session, but not a lot. We have an entire training on that. We did a whole session with a bunch of you a couple of years ago on that. So we don't think that's the way it ought to go. But we do know that the question of faith in a democracy is as American as you get. Like, we've been talking about this on these lands that we call the United States, and in our official documents, and in our imagination about what this country is. We've been talking about this. And this is a shared struggle for all of us over the course of the last 248 plus years. For some of us, it feels like this is settled. People said some things a while ago, we made some decisions, we've moved on. For other people, they feel like it's completely unsettled. And there's a lot of people on the spectrum in between. Where do we find ourselves, and how are we going to move forward? We want to suggest to you that this is as American as you can get to talk about this. People of faith, people without any faith, people of the more dominant religions in our society, people of the religions that are less well known, all of us have a part to play in this. And we want to make sure that we create an environment where everyone can participate in it. So that's what we're up to. If that sounds good to you, we'd love for you to stay around with us for the next hour and a half. Does that sound okay? Yeah. All right, great. Great, we're glad. Oh, thank you. Yeah, we'll take that applause. We'll take any applause that we can. The United States has had a very complicated and tumultuous relationship with the question of what's the role of faith and religion. Right? So much so that when we launched the Declaration of Independence and then a constitution to form us as a nation, we had to put it in the very first amendment, something about it. We're going to talk a little bit about that. I want to suggest that doesn't mean we settled the question. It means we started the conversation that every generation then has participated in this country. How do we do this as an us in a way that expressions of faith in public life include everyone and exclude no one? That's our goal, that's our hope, that's what we think we're up to.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you go back and look at the formation of the colonies, the 13 original colonies. They had different approaches to this question. It wasn't a uniform thing. There was, Massachusetts was primarily a Puritan colony. And to be a part of that colony, to have certain privileges and opportunities in that colony, you had to be a Puritan. Pennsylvania took a different approach. You had to be a Moravian or a Quaker, and there was a different approach there. There were other colonies that were Catholic. And then there was a Baptist preacher who started a colony, right? Roger Williams. And Roger Williams started Rhode Island, and Rhode Island, founded by a Baptist preacher, was a colony that really began this approach of freedom from there being a state religion. So this idea of how do we figure this out? What does this look like place to place? Like, we have had, as Americans, we have had different approaches to this for a very long time. And then when these colonies decide to become a union, they've got to figure this out. And it's interesting that the approach of the smallest colony is the one that won out. Yeah, ultimately, right. In the end.
the smallest one. Hey, now, look, some of you were here last time we were here. Remember when I accidentally mansplained you all on the American Baptist because I didn't know this was an American Baptist church? You remember that day? That was a great day. Yeah. I had no idea this was an American Baptist church, and we put up a thing from Amanda Tyler from the American Baptist Joint Committee on Religious Liberty, and I'm like, hey, you might not know the American Baptist, and you all were so sweet and kind. You just let me go on, and I finished it looking all smug, and you're like, yeah, this is an American Baptist community, so thanks for explaining who we are to ourselves. So that was a great moment. But Robb's point is well taken, and some of you know this, and I actually know that there's people in this church who've been thinking about this a long time. There's experts on thinking about faith in democracy. Are any of those people here constitutional experts? I know there's some people that have written things for churches about this. Like, this is a congregation that understands this very, very well. But I got to tell you something. You all are outliers. We travel the country. Most people don't think about this stuff at all. It all just kind of comes to them as a package deal.
Yeah. Like, America's it's a Christian nation, right?
Right.
We have these Judeo-Christian values that we're founded on. Yeah. Like, this is the kind of stuff that's in the ethos. It's the water we swim in, and there's lots of people that don't give any kind of intentional reflective thought to it, and as a result, they end up very persuaded when someone comes along with a Christian nationalist message.
You might be very well acquainted with Christian nationalism, what it means. It can mean a lot of things. Sometimes it has to do with churches that put too much nationalism in their faith. That's concerning. I've been a Christian pastor my entire adult life, so I've thought a lot about that with other pastors and what they do. And
looking to see if there's a flag
in here. If they have flags in their churches or not, what they do on the 4th of July. There can be a polluting and a damaging of the Christian faith when it becomes something that's just being utilized for a government's purposes. But there's another kind of Christian nationalism that I actually fear a whole lot more, not because of its damage to churches, but because of its damage to the union. And that's the kind that says stuff like this, that Christian nationalism is about the government advocating for, deriving its authority from, or granting privilege to the Christian faith. This is the version of Christian nationalism that's alive and well. This is the version of Christian nationalism that is built into the MAGA movement, by the way. Not all Republicans buy into Christian nationalism. The MAGA movement is built on it. It is the platform that carries it forward. The United States Senator from the great state of Ohio, who's now offering himself to be the Vice President of the United States, has decided that his religion should not only be the way that the government responds to people, but the way his religion thinks about the role of parents and children should determine how much of a say in a democracy somebody has. This is the kind of thing that's extremely dangerous. The reason we think a conversation like we're going to have tonight, where you're hearing from faith leaders and activist organizers like us and people running for office and people like y'all talking about this, is because Christian nationalism is well organized, well funded, and well articulated. And it's really a problem. Now, the solution to that is not to tell those people to be quiet, because this is a democracy and we don't tell each other to be quiet. The solution is for any of us who've been too quiet to speak up. And we start sharing some things. We have a little joke that I like to say around politics. It's sometimes when liberals and progressives or Democrats are moving around, they drive around in electric vehicles that are silent. And when the MAGA movement drives around, it's just one guy in a big noisy motorcycle making a whole bunch of noise. There's not as many of them, but they're making a lot of noise. So we like this little wake up, speak up, stand up idea that we ask people to start making a little noise. Or as sometimes we joke, we say, hey, your collective mute button is on the Zoom call. So take the mute off and let's start saying a few things. So we think it's a good idea to start asking people to engage in a question of faith and democracy, because Christian nationalism is not the way it should go. Now, at the fear of scaring you, we want to show you what the Christian nationalists are saying. There's a group called the Watchmen. They have a thing called the Watchmen Decree. This is a group of them at a conference a couple of years ago. Have any of you seen the documentary God and Country? You seen that documentary? It's put out by Robb. He puts it together. It's about Christian nationalism. You can watch it on places where you watch things. I don't know, Apple and Netflix and all that kind of stuff. And this segment is in there.
Can I just make a comment
Please.
about this? This is maybe the largest QR code I've ever seen in my life.
There it is. Those people know how to use a QR code. People can point their phone. If you were to point your phone at that QR code in the corner, the big one up on the screen, it would take you to the Watchmen decree. But you don't have to just see it on your phone, because they're going to read it out loud to you inside of an arena of people. It's one of the more clear articulations of the modern version of Christian nationalism. And I'm afraid that if we don't find new ways to speak up to new people in new places, this kind of idea is becoming far too catchy. So it's not pleasant, but here you go.
All right, go ahead. All right, Dutch, lead us.
So we'll read it together, okay? As a patriot of faith, I attest my allegiance first and foremost to the kingdom of God and the Great Commission. Secondly, I agree to be a watchman over our nation concerning its people and their rights for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Whereas we, the church, are God's governing body on the earth. Whereas we have been given legal power from heaven and now exercise our authority. Whereas we are God's ambassadors and spokespeople over the earth. Whereas through the power of God, we are the world influencers. Whereas because of our covenant with God, we are equipped and delegated by Him to destroy every attempted advance of the enemy. We make our declarations. We decree that America's executive branch of government will honor God and defend the Constitution. We decree that our legislative branch, Congress, will write only laws that are righteous and constitutional. We decree that our judicial system will issue rulings that are biblical and constitutional. We declare that we stand against wokeness, the occult, and every evil attempt against our nation. We declare and we now take back our God-given freedoms according to our Constitution. We declare that we take back influence at the local level in our communities. We decree that we take back and permanently control positions of influence and leadership in each of the 7 mountains. We decree that the blood of Jesus covers and protects our nation. It protects and separates us from God. We declare that our nation is energy dependent. We declare that America is strong spiritually, financially, militarily, and technologically. We decree that evil carries no power, authority, or rights in our land nor over our people. We decree that we will operate in unity, going beyond denominational lines in order to accomplish the purposes of God for our nation. And we decree that America shall be saved. You know this.
You get it more? Here we go.
All right. Now,
Let's take a deep breath.
if you were finding yourself in the middle of that saying, nuh-uh, all the way along, and then you got to number 9, that America will be energy independent, and thought, what's next? We will all eat more fiber and stay regular? I think number 9 is in there because this effort is well funded by the oil industry. So this is the kind of thing that is not fringe anymore in America. A major political party that has been in the White House 3.5 years ago is based on that. So that's one option of what we could have in a conversation about the role of faith in democracy, that the church is God's representatives and tells the government what to do. And that's something we don't want. So we think there's a better way forward, and that's what we'd love to spend a little bit of time talking with you about tonight. Let's go real old school and look at the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, shall we? These folks have an idea that somehow their religion told them that they are God's ambassadors to the earth, and they're the people who are supposed to rule over this country, and ultimately to rule over every nation, to evangelize the entire world. And I promise you, the Christian nationalists that we just saw don't just want the United States of America. It is a global movement for every nation on earth. That's how they describe it. But our Declaration of Independence in the United States is built on this notion. You might remember this. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Now, I want to suggest to you that that line, self-evident, sits in contrast to we believe that these truths that we're about to articulate come from the divine.
Yeah. There's a difference between something that is self-evident and something that is divinely revealed. And so when the Christian nationalists talk about having judgments from the Supreme Court that are biblical and constitutional, they're saying that there is the basis for that, the basis for the laws, the basis for the rulings, the basis for the truths that they want to be what determines our morality as a country, what determines our laws as a country, are those things that are, in their view, revealed by God in the Bible. And what the Declaration of Independence says is, no, that's not where this stuff comes from. It's self-evident. It's not revealed by some divine inspiration in some divinely inspired text. It is self-evident. It is available to everyone.
To everyone. So this is a different imagination. And for some of us, we're going to have to sort of get back to what was this whole thing about, and how did people who've gone before us in this continuous flow of the democracy of the United States River, how have they talked about it? And some of the early arguments were way more intense, by the way, than what we're experiencing now. What Robb was reminding us of, that the colonies were in argument with one another, there was even more on the line. The early days of deciding, do we say that this is a nation by divine decree that roots its truth in the scriptures, or in the self-evident truth that anyone can see? So I like this version of it a lot. So we spent a lot of time thinking about this. Now we'll go on. This is the thing about the founders, right? Just can't help themselves.
Some things right and some things not so right.
That all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Now, that's a line that you'll hear people talk about all the time. Well, they're talking about the Creator. And many of you have been in conversations with people around this, and you're like, oh, if you want to believe in the same Creator that many of the authors of the Declaration of Independence in, then you end up with a deistic God that has no involvement in human affairs,
yes,
right? Or you end up with a different kind of God.
Yes, but when we hear the word creator, we often think, oh, they're taking a stand on an argument between creationism and evolution, right? That's what we think when we hear the word creator. We import our whole arguments about creationism and evolution into it. Those arguments had not started yet.
That's right. That's right.
Right? Like, was Charles Darwin alive in 1776?
That's right.
What they're saying when they say we're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, they're not saying anything about how the world came into being. They're not taking a stand against evolution because it wasn't a thing yet. What they're saying was, this has been a part of the human existence from the beginning.
Yeah.
And the way they expressed that was simply talking about the Creator, because that's the way people talked then.
For these rights, among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, the government and their institutions among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Where does the government get its power? From the consent of the governed, not from the divine.
Now, they're coming from a country where a king was divinely appointed.
Right. The group there saying we strike our independence against the one who says that their king is called by God, they say, not around here. We are going to have a government based on a different narrative. The consent of the governed.
The basis of our laws, the basis of the policies that get enacted is not a scriptural basis from a group of people that, it's not some religious thing. It's not some Judeo-Christian morality and values. The basis of our laws and the basis of our government is the consent of the governed. We the people.
Yeah, it's us, y'all. That wherever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends and its rights of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute a new government.
Insurrection.
Who gets to fix it?
Oh, no. Oh, well,
Who?
No, that's not that.
Well, people in England called that one an insurrection. We just don't need another one. What these guys are arguing for here in the Declaration of Independence is that you don't appeal to the divine, you appeal to one another. Yeah. We're in this, that we the people are up to this. That's what we're doing. So this argument I want to suggest has been long, it's been ongoing, it's important, and there's some real clues to us on how we make sure we end up with a democracy for all of us.
And can we just remind ourselves that this conclusion, which was really the start of a conversation, is arrived at in the context of a Pennsylvania and a Massachusetts and a Rhode Island and a South Carolina and a Virginia that have all different approaches to this. Like, it's not like everybody agreed. They came to this conclusion in the midst of really smart, really powerful people saying, oh, no, you got to be a Puritan like us. Right? So, like, it's these conclusions came out of the very types of conflict that we're in the midst of now.
Okay, so we'll jump ahead. We've got the Declaration of Independence. We have a whole war. Then later they're going to write a constitution. When they write a constitution, there's going to be the First Amendment. Now, depending if you're one of those people that says the first thing someone says is the most important or the last thing someone says is the most important, wherever you find yourself on that spectrum, the first was at least the first. So among the first things that we decided we had to talk about in a United States Constitution is that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Right out of the chutes. Amendment 1, Congress and any other government authority makes no laws to establish a religion. These folks took an opinion on this question. Whatever it's going to be, faith and democracy, religion and society, however it's going to go, we're not having an official one. There ain't no group of people among us who are called out more than others to tell the rest of us how it's officially going to go. So there's a sense in which those of us who know this story are just being drowned out by all the people saying things like, well, this has been a Christian nation from the beginning, and we have a creator, and our rights only come from God, and they don't come from the government, and all of this stuff, right? So there's some things we can talk about that people have been talking about for a very long time. And then they go on and they talk about the other important things like freedom of speech and freedom of the press and freedom to protest and freedom to assemble and freedom to call upon your government. Isn't it interesting, though, that like they were as bothered about this question as we are, because they're like, okay, but number one here, let's make sure it's really clear where we are on this religious question, right? So that says something. I want to encourage us, okay, we find ourselves then in a good, solid American tradition of having it out about this. Just like we're going to argue about what does freedom of speech include? When can someone say something? When can someone not say something? What can the press write? What can the press not write? What kind of protests can we be involved in? What kind of protests can we not be involved in? What kind of approaching our government can we do, and when does it cross the line and become an insurrection that's a crime? Those things we're debating, and so is the first part of the amendment. What does it mean to establish? The Establishment Clause is a super big deal. Some of you know this really well. Courts are having to decide where's religious freedom and where's the government giving too much power to a religion where it de facto establishes that religion with more power than other religions. So we're not done with this project yet. The American democracy is in our hands. We don't get to kick this back to our founders. We get to be fueled by the work of our founders. But we have to keep doing the work. Our churches, our civic organizations, our community groups, this is our work to do. I promise you, the Christian nationalist crowd, they're working this all the time. Sunday school class, emails, newsletters, constant trickle and flow of communicating their view. So we got to kick it into gear a little bit and make sure we make it clear in all the places and all the spaces what's going on.
Do you remember back from school, maybe you learned some of these words and memorized them. Anybody remember at least what used to be the longest word in the dictionary? Anti-disestablishmentarianism. That's right. You remember this? There used to be that thing of like anti-disestablishmentarianism. It's the longest word in the dictionary. And we all knew it as that little trivia of it being the longest word in the dictionary. Did you know that anti-disestablishmentarianism is Christian nationalism?
That's what it means.
That's what it means. So in the 1860s, in England, there was a group of people who wanted to disestablish the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment of the Constitution. They wanted to disestablish the Church of England as the official religion of England.
So they wanted in England, a group of people wanted something like the United States had.
Yep.
In England, they had an establishment process that Christianity was the official religion of England. The Church of England and the Queen were all in it together. It was officially a Christian nation. A bunch of people wanted to
disestablish. Let's pull that thing apart. Let's separate these. Maybe what they got going on over in America might be working pretty well. Let's do that. And then there was a backlash against the disestablishment people. They were the anti-disestablishment people. Anti-disestablishmentarianism is Christian nationalism. Now, here's the thing. You ever buy a new car? Have you had this phenomenon where you buy a new car and you think, oh, this is special. I'm the only one who's got this car. This is great. And as soon as you buy a new car, what do? You see that car everywhere, right? All of a sudden, everybody on your street is driving the same thing you are. And Christian nationalism is a little bit that way. Once you understand it, you start to see it everywhere, right? You start to recognize it everywhere. It's not just in trivia words like anti-disestablishmentarianism. It shows up in all sorts of other places as well.
So we have an anti-disestablishmentarianism movement in the United States. We just call it Christian nationalism because that's what they're wanting to do. So again, we're in a long history of people in the 1860s that were doing it, and then it happened again in the 1920s, then it happened again in the 1950s, and we're doing the work of those who've come before us. And unfortunately, heartbreakingly, those who follow us are going to have to keep doing this work as well. And those next generations are going to look back to us and say, how did they handle it in the 2020s? How did we do? This is our time. This is our time to step up and to step forward. So what does an individual's religious commitment, when does that end if they're in public life? This is a difficult question. My representative in Congress for the last 8 years has been Ilhan Omar. She's a Muslim woman in Minneapolis, where I live. I'm really proud of her. I vote for her. I support her. I'm really proud of her as a Muslim woman. I want her Muslim faith to be crucial to her life because she wants that. But I don't want her using the Quran as the basis for any of the laws she wants to pass for the United States government.
And in the same way, my congressman is a man by the name of Steve Womack. You probably wouldn't know his name. You might recognize him. He was the guy holding the gavel when the new Speaker of the House was gavelled in to become Speaker. Steve Womack is an evangelical Christian who goes to a large megachurch in my area in Northwest Arkansas. And Steve Womack is what he would describe himself as a Bible-believing Christian. And I don't want Steve Womack using the Bible as the basis for any of the laws he advocates for in Congress. See how that works? It's the same standard regardless of whether or not that person is a part of my faith or not.
So then what does a person do with their faith? What if you are a clerk and your job is to issue, I don't know, let's come up with
Marriage
a silly.
licenses?
Yeah, I'll come up with a silly.
I don't know, marriage licenses. Let's
A
go with
marriage
that.
license. And your religion tells you that only certain people should be allowed to marry each other. And then your state says, no, we're going to grant marriage licenses to people differently than your religion wants to approve of. What do you do? Here's our question, right?
Yep.
So let's get ourselves ready to answer that question. Let's raise up children and future generations and just make it a typical, like a great thing to do when you're out with your friends and it's a nice, evening and it's next Tuesday and you got Tuesday, night out and you're hanging around. You're like, hey, how about we talk a little anti-disestablishmentarianism, huh? We go all old school, longest word in the dictionary from when we were kids, and you start stirring it up. So we want to encourage all of us to start talking about this. Now, around our work, here's how we think about it. Because we travel the country in a big bus that says faith, hope, and love, supporting democracy for all. I'm an evangelical pastor. Robb's been a pastor in his life. Dan, who you're going to hear in a minute, was a worship leader. The other two people you saw up there singing, worship leaders from the evangelical traditions. Some people don't know that there's progressive Baptists. Hey, let me mansplain progressive Baptists to you for a minute. And some people don't know there's progressive evangelicals. Some people think that all the progressive evangelicals could probably fit in that bus out there, but there's a few more of us than that. But I come from a little stream of progressive evangelicals. But we think we should be able to talk about faith in a way that's going to bring people to the common good, as if the common good is the shared watering hole, and we all come there by our own paths to meet at the shared watering hole.
Yeah.
So we put together this language on our website.
Right. And then the question becomes, well, what is the common good?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? And our answer is, this truth is self-evident.
Yeah, you tell us. You know what good is.
I mean, that literally we've had
Yeah.
people ask us,
Oh,
well,
yeah.
what's the common good? And our response has been, well, you know good.
Yeah, tell us.
You know good when you see it.
Yeah, you tell us what's good.
There's a commonness
yes,
to the
that's
goodness.
It. That's a common. That's the point. It's good for all. So we like to say it like this. Maybe you'll like this language. Maybe it'll ring true with you. Maybe not. It's on our website. You can find it all there. If you want a copy, you go to the About page. When the Hebrew Scriptures say to treat the alien and the refugee as you'd want to be treated, because God desires compassion for the widow and the orphan and the poor and the vulnerable, they call people to seek the common good. When Jesus says to love your neighbor as you love yourself, and when Paul says, do not seek your own interests only, but the interests of others, and when John and James say that no one can say they love God or have faith in God if they fail to demonstrate love for their neighbor, they're calling people to seek the common good. When the Quran says that no one is a believer until they desire their brother or sister what they desire for themselves, and teaches that God made us different so that we would seek to understand and know one another, the Quran calls humanity to seek the common good. When great leaders of Sikhism say to value others as you value yourself and to avoid creating enmity with anyone because God is within everyone. The Taoists say to regard your neighbor's gain or loss as your own. When the Buddhists and the Hindus say do not hurt others in the way that you would find hurtful. When secular humanists advocate for the principle of reciprocity, they call humanity to seek the common good. This means that good-hearted Christians and Jews and Muslims and people of no faith and of all traditions cannot simply vote for what is in their best interest for themselves as individuals, or even what's best for their own religion or party or race or nation alone, but must be concerned for the common good. Or to put it differently, selfish people of every religion and tradition vote for self-seeking interests and partisan interests alone. But good people of every religion can vote for the common good. So we're trying. We're trying to find words because human beings, God love us, we just use words, right? There's just no way around it. We're wordy creatures. Consciousness and words go together. So we're trying to get there with words. And words are not enough. They're crucial. They have to be there. We could all get good at them. And they're not enough. So they're a launch pad, and then we have to figure out other ways. So we're going to keep talking about that as we go here. Can there be a way where something more collective can get us there? So now you're going to start hearing some testimonies. First is going to come from Daniel Deitrich. Do you want me to intro the song, or you want to say a bunch of things about it? Okay. You're going to hear from Dan here in a minute, and then we're going to bring up Pastor Alicia, and we're going to talk for a bit about how faith leaders do this. And here's the thing. We don't have the answer to this because the role of faith in democracy is not a problem. You see, problems have solutions. When we had to figure out how far to put this projector from that screen to make it big enough, that's a problem. We fixed it by moving it this way or moving the screen that way. That's how problems work. When the mirror fell off of our bus driving down the highway yesterday, the big side mirror, we pulled over and went to Home Depot for an hour and a half and bought a bunch of stuff and drilled holes and put a bolt in it and put it back on. It was a problem, and we fixed it. That's how problems work. They have solutions. Faith in democracy is not a problem. It's a predicament. See, predicaments are a grand dilemma. They're a big drama. Predicaments require multiple responses. Problems have solutions. Predicaments require multiple responses. And because this is a predicament we find ourselves in, all of our responses will join together on our pathway forward. We're not looking for one solution. We're looking for all of us to respond. So we'll talk, and we'll put together buses or training, and we'll write stuff, and people will write things, and we'll talk, and we'll argue, and some people will make music. They'll take their own story, and they'll make music, and they'll call people forward. So that's what you're going to hear in the 3 songs you're going to hear tonight, are little testimonies of how people have responded to these questions in their own taking. So this is Daniel Deitrich.
Hey, everybody. We're all trying to figure out how to live our faith out in the world and in a democracy, and we don't always get it right. And one of the first times I noticed that we weren't getting it right, I was in church, the church that I grew up in, and it was a big, beautiful sanctuary, a lot of stained glass. And at the front of the sanctuary, there was a huge stained glass cross, beautiful cross. And I remember on 4th of July, we raised a 40-foot American flag that obscured the cross. And I just remember being very uncomfortable with that symbolism, that maybe we had gotten too cozy, church and state. And then the 2016 election came, and I saw so many good people that either I knew personally or the larger-than-life voices of the evangelical movement that informed my faith throw their weight behind a man that looked nothing like Jesus. And I was frustrated and angry and sad, and in the years following, just every line in the sand was crossed. And one of the last lines for me was when Donald Trump and his administration intentionally separated families at the border. And I don't know if we're going to play the video later, but Jeff Sessions goes in front of the press and says, yeah, we're doing this because of Romans 13. We're doing this because of the Apostle Paul. And so I put my frustrations and my story into this song, and maybe you can hear a bit of your story in it as well. It's called Hymn for the 81%. I grew up in your churches, Sunday morning and evening service. I knelt in tears at the foot of the rugged cross. You taught me every life is sacred. Feed the hungry and clothe the naked. I learned from you the highest law is love. And I believed you when you said I should trust the words in red to guide my steps through a wicked world. I assumed you'd do the same, so imagine my dismay when I watched you lead the sheep straight to the wolves. You said to love the lost, well, I'm loving you now. You said to speak the truth, well, I'm calling you out. Why don't you live the words that you put in my mouth? May love overcome and justice roll down. Oh, they started putting kids in cages, ripping mothers from their babies, and I looked to you to speak on their behalf. Oh, but all I heard was silence. Or worse, you justified it, singing glory, hallelujah, raise the flag. See, your fear it turned to hatred, but you baptized it with language torn from the pages of the good book. You weaponized religion, and you wonder why I'm leaving to find Jesus on the wrong side of your walls. You said to love the lost, well, I'm loving you now. You said to speak the truth, well, I'm calling you out. Why don't you live the words that you put in my mouth? May love overcome and justice roll down. Come home, come home. You're better than this. Oh, you taught me better than this. Come home, come home. You're better than this. I used to think you were better than this. Now come home, come home. Oh. Maybe I was too naive, or I just didn't want to see that there's always been a little poison in the well. Our churches sit on stolen land, a nation built by stolen hands, and we use the Bible to justify it all. Yeah, from slavery and segregation to mass deportation. This is who we are, but not who we have to be. There's a lot of work to do to pull up the evil by the roots, but repentance has to come before there's peace. You said to love the lost, I'm trying to love you now. You said to speak the truth, that's why I'm calling you out. Why don't you live the words that you put in my mouth? justice roll down. May love overcome and justice roll down. Thank you so much.
Doug, we have heard that song hundreds of times now.
Yeah.
Every time. Gets me every single time.
Every time Rob's like, I'm not crying, you're crying. I'm not crying, you're crying. We've heard Dan sing that song, like he said, in front of Proud Boys in Marco Island, Florida, sitting on their trucks with their guns on their hips, blazing their horns to try to stop a rally. And Dan just leans in and sings it. I've seen him sing it in churches, I've seen him sing it in fields. Not every time do people stand up and applaud, so we appreciate the applaud. But every time people feel it. We all have a thing we can do to pull up the evil by the root. So you find your thing. We can't sing a song or make a song like that. Some of us wouldn't want to, because Dan wrote that song as a worship leader of a church, and we found him, we were driving around in 2020, heard the song on YouTube. Now it's got 780 or 800,000 views of that song. You can find it on YouTube. But it was starting to gain some attention, got on Fox News, where they were saying it wasn't a great idea, that song. They were condemning it. Dan came with us, played a couple of events. A few months later, got fired from his church, where he was a worship leader for that song. There's a cost you pay sometimes when you do this kind of stuff. But now Dan just lives in a bus out there, and if anybody has a place for poor Dan to live with him at their house, he'd take it. No, he doesn't.
Their loss, our gain, something like that.
Yeah. No, he doesn't live in the bus. He lives in Michigan. This is sort of what we're up to. So we're looking for multiple responses. So if you're up for it, we'd love to invite into this question of what role does faith play in a pluralistic society in our democracy? How do faith leaders approach all of this? Sister Kicks, would you mind joining us? Now you might wonder where that comes from, but Joel said, do you have a rapper name? And then she started talking about this, and she wears these shoes and said something about Sister Kicks. So Alicia, thank you so much for having us. By the way, it was like a week ago, 2 weeks ago that we messaged?
It was Monday night at like 8 o'clock.
A week ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, what day is it today?
What day is it?
It's Wednesday.
It's Wednesday.
So 10 days ago.
Yeah.
Not even. Okay, maybe.
9 days ago, I texted Alicia and said, hey, we're coming to Ohio. Any chance you guys want to do something? You know, you want to play? It's like your friend, you just call them when you were kids, and you just call them up and say like, hey, you want to do something? And then you have those friends that go, yeah, let's do something. What are we going to do? When I grew up, I had two kinds of friends. Literally, Paul, we called him Kazi, and Steve-O. I'd call Kazi and say, Kazi, you want to do something? He'd say, what do you want to do? I'd call Steve and say, Steve-O, you want to do something? He'd say, yeah. What do you want to do? See the difference? One was deciding what we were going to do, and then if he was going to say yes or not. The other one was like, oh yeah, I want to do something. Thank you for saying yes. Thanks for being a yes and saying, yeah, let's do something.
The yes and.
The yes and.
The yes and, folks. Here we are.
Yes, and we could, I mean, seriously, I should share with them sometimes a text. It's just like, let's go, with a bunch of O's on it. Like, yep, let's go. So thank you. So that tells me a lot about you and a lot about this community and a lot about this church. You've had to think a lot about this as somebody who's in a church, and I noticed outside, you're willing to say some things about this church. How do you think about this question of what's the role of faith in a democracy as a faith leader?
How much time do you have?
As much as you want to take. We have nowhere to go. We're literally far from home, and we live in a bus. So.
And you live in a bus.
Yeah, we're
in
here
a van
all night.
down by the river.
Right. A little too close to home there, but yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You know, let me just say a couple things before I launch. First of all, I really appreciate the distinction that you made between a problem and a predicament. I think that was really instructive. I don't know if others felt that way, but I really liked that language, so thank you. And the second and perhaps more challenging question that you posed, right, is like, where does our life of faith end and where does the public square begin? And then we know that there are, these Venn diagrams where things intersect, right? And that's why we're having this whole conversation about faith and democracy, because we recognize that these things intersect. So what role does faith play in a pluralistic secular democracy? Well, I can tell you what it shouldn't do.
Good, love it.
And that is all the things you described, which is that we ought not, because I don't know if you knew this, Doug, but we're an American Baptist church.
Can I tell you about them?
Yep, you can if you want.
Okay.
Did you know I'm an ordained one? It doesn't matter what I believe. It matters to me. Right? It matters to me. It might matter to this community. And I will say, for this particular community, we have folks who are agnostic, we have folks who are atheists, we have folks who are Catholic, we have folks who are UU. We come from all walks of life. Everyone is welcome here. We talk about that every week, every Sunday, week in and week out. We have no right to tell other people what to believe. We have no right to tell people what to believe. And more than that, we certainly don't get to tell the government what to do based on whatever the heck it is we believe. That is not, as I see it, democracy. That is not, as I understand it, what Roger Williams, when he came over, set out to do. Right? So I am not saying that we check our faith at the door. We can never do that. That is naive thinking. It is with us, it is part of us, and we need to check ourselves, and we need to ask ourselves critically and reflect critically on this question about what does our faith life dictate? What do our beliefs dictate? And how do we live those out without imposing them on other people in ways that could create harm? And I think what we're seeing right now with this turn in Christian nationalism is we are seeing a body of people, a body of believers who are seeking to oppress and to do harm.
So we had a brief conversation earlier about the beauty of improv and,
Yes.
what this is, this way of
Yes.
creating something of entertainment, enjoyment, sometimes comedy or a creative process, and really create a community of people that make something together. And you're better at this than me, so please talk about as much as you want. Yeah. In improv, you make an offering, and someone responds to the offering.
Yes.
Which is really different than you make a demand.
Correct.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because what we don't want is communities where people feel like they can't share what matters to them.
Absolutely.
You want people saying, I have a view of the world. I would love for you to know about it. You might find it interesting. Maybe we could do something together around this versus I'm going to put a demand upon you from my perspective, that my experience is going to become your obligation.
Yes.
Improv invites us into a dynamic that allows us to practice this a little bit. Would you talk about that a bit?
Yeah. People that are sitting here tonight, they've heard me say yes and a million bazillion times. And folks, I'm going to trademark this so you can't take it, but I want to create buttons that say we are ambassadors.
Oh. Love it.
Ambassadors. Yes, and whatever we are presented with, our opportunity is always to engage the reality as it is and add to it. We've been working as a church community in this culture to shift to this yes and. How many people here have sat in a board meeting? Any kind of board meeting, right? Where decisions are having to be made. I saw some faces like, oh, and somebody raises an idea and people are like, but, right? The whole thing gets shut down. The whole thing gets shut down. Whereas if we have the and, we can invite more ideas and more energy and more opportunity into these conversations and not shut it down, not close it off at the door. And that's something I think that we've cultivated here and work really, really hard at, is to say, there are no bad ideas. There are just some ideas that are better than others.
Yeah. And America could be an and experiment for living together, right?
Yeah. Ooh,
this
could
and.
it?
Yeah. And there's this idea that the words that we use create the worlds that we live in.
Yes.
And you're giving a great example of that with yes and being this phrase that can that can draw us into an imagining a way of existing together.
Right.
America has some of those phrases.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about like the phrase "a more perfect union," and that's one that captures my imagination, because I'm like, okay, that's saying something good about where we are and have been, but it's also saying something about that we haven't been as perfect as we could be. And there's an invitation for us to create that. Another one of those phrases from our kind of political lexicon is the phrase "we the people." And that's one, again, that draws us into a conversation together about how do we do this. Now, should I transition into the video here as we talk a little bit?
Well, I'd love to hear, Alicia, your thoughts on this, because outside on the sign, it says "we the people."
It does.
And one of the things that's curious about that phrase, we also have it on our bus, we like it a lot, is that in the church world, a lot of times pastors are reminding congregants that the church is not only a building or an institution or a community, it's a people movement. And there becomes a weird thing for a lot of folks who hear their church talked about as the people, and then they hear the government talked about as "we the people," and they're not really sure then, well, why doesn't the "we the people" of the church just become the "we the people" of the government? And it gets "we the people-y," it gets all weedy in there, right?
We the people-y.
Weedy people in the thing there.
Yeah. So there's a subtext to our
Nice.
banner. Did you see that?
I did.
What does it say,
really,
friends?
I'm a top line reader only.
Yeah, "we the people." And then underneath it says something really important. And it says, "should mean everybody."
There you go.
Yeah?
Okay, so you guys are making a comment about the common shared phrase, "we the people."
The common good.
Yeah, common good.
The common good.
Wonderful. So we're going to show you a video here of a fella that we saw on a MSNBC special about a person who had run for Congress in South Texas. Myra Flores ran under a movement called MAGA, Make America Godly Again. Started in part by this pastor. You can see the banner up in his church. And this documentary was made about her because she won as a Republican in a traditionally Democratic area in South Texas along the border. And so people are trying to figure out what happened. She won in a special election 2 years ago, since has lost in a full election, but now is running again this year under this MAGA movement, a young Latina woman who won this seat. So the interview with this pastor is really interesting. So I'd like to watch it with you. I know you haven't seen it yet, but watch it with you, because he does this whole thing around "we the people," and it's this other version of it, and I think it'd be fun for us to talk about. So you good? Okay. So here we go. This is a pastor, and again, this is on an MSNBC special, which you could watch sometime if you want to watch the whole MSNBC special.
You know that Thomas Jefferson said that you could even call yourself a Christian and an American if you weren't a God-fearing Christian. And we're going to proclaim that this nation belongs to you, God, like it was founded in 1776, Lord. Lord, we pray for the supremacy of God in this nation again.
How involved do you think someone like you should actually be in politics and in guiding policy?
Oh, I think we need to. I mean, we like I said, this nation was founded under God, and so we've gone away from that. The church has.
But the nation, in the Constitution and in the Declaration of Independence, it doesn't give any partiality to Christianity. In fact, the opposite, right? And how do you reconcile those two things?
There's freedom of religion, but at the same time, they understood that this whole foundation was built on the Word of God. If we understood, they don't want to force it on you, but they understood, okay, this Constitution will be built. They used 27 scriptures to form the Constitution.
But Thomas Jefferson, who you quoted on stage to your audience, he's very much the one that believed in the separation between church and state. So again,
but you know what? It's funny because that separation of church that always comes up, but it was never a law. And that's the thing, like as a pastor, I just wanted to, to tell pastors, it's okay to talk about politics in your church. You won't get in trouble.
Thank you, Jesus.
In Cabrera's view, Miraflores is the beginning of something much bigger.
Thank you, Jesus. And devil, we're going to kick you out. Kick you out of our cities, kick you out of our states, and kick you out of this nation, and kick you out of that White House in the name of Jesus.
When you say something like the states belong to Judah or the states belong to Christianity, is that not dangerous?
How am I being a danger to society if I'm preaching what the Bible teaches and all we want to do is
politicians are elected to serve the people,
exactly.
right? To serve everybody, not to serve a God.
Yeah. But hold on, but we are electing them. So they're representing us.
And there's also Muslims that elect them. And
exactly.
I mean,
so that's what I'm saying. So now as a voice, as a church, we have a right to vote for whoever we want to vote for. So, but if we don't use that voice, then what's the point then? Then we're not doing our jobs as Christians to vote for people that have our values. When you're born again, like your mentality changes. I don't think like a Latino no more. I think like a man of God.
Are there any candidates that Make America Godly Again has endorsed?
Myra was just the beginning. It was just, she opened a door for other people to walk through.
I mean, you yourself were there during her inauguration.
Exactly.
And if I remember correctly, you told Speaker Pelosi that you wanted to take this country back for God.
That's right. And that was, let me tell you, it was, if I died today, it was worth it.
From the United States Capitol to the Rio Grande Valley, messages like Make America Godly Again are reaching thousands of Latina churchgoers.
I haven't been to a service here, but that's pretty much what it's like, right?
100%!
What do you think about his approach to politics and religion and the mixing of them? What are your reactions?
I couldn't say it in the house of the Lord, so let me try. I want you to notice the language, because we were talking about improv before the break, right? Did anyone else notice how many buts he put in there?
Yeah.
How many buts there were? Yeah. Yes, but. That was not improv, folks. It's not a yes and. Yeah. It's dangerous.
How? Why?
Because it's not true.
Do you see the struggle that he's trapped in? So if we think about this as a predicament.
Yes.
We're in a predicament. We're in a huge struggle in the United States. As an us, we're figuring this out. He's ended up with a set of tools to use. His tools come up short. So he has to end up with this like, yes, that, but then also this. And you can sort of feel the, but they work for us, and we, the people, are the one who elect them, but other people do too, but then we shouldn't be quiet. Why is the government, like, you can kind of feel the struggle in there. What advice would you give to Pastor Cabrera? If you, I know we're putting you on the spot. You're sitting around, or you end up at some thing, I don't know, you guys are both getting your cars fixed somewhere, and you end up at an oil change place. You're like, what do you do? He goes, I'm a pastor. You go, me too. And he says, well, I run the Make America Godly thing again. And he somehow confides in you, and he says, but I got to tell you, like, it doesn't make as much sense to me as I think it does. Because I'll tell you, I know a lot of Christian nationalists, it never makes as much sense to them as, it seems like sometimes. How do you help somebody get out of the predicament that he's in? How would you approach it?
So I've been doing a lot of research and reading recently on things like mass psychology, cult movements, et cetera, just trying to get myself more educated. And one of the things that is resoundingly true is showing up again and again and again in the research is that building trust is about the best thing we can do. That's it. Right? And so for me, if I was sitting with my brother here, and he is my brother because he is a human and he is my neighbor, I would start by asking some questions and listening. Listening. and trying to build that trust. Because what he's got going on is not going to be easily remedied while I'm getting my oil changed, which, by the way, I drive an EV, so I wouldn't be there, but it's fine.
Very good. Very good. Touche.
Touche. There is value in listening and building the trust, right? And I think so often in this conversation, there is a complete lack of trust. We are having these conversations on platforms like social media where there is no relationship, where there is no trust, where there are no stakes. And so people can say whatever they want, right? Whereas when you come face to face with somebody, we're talking about a different kind of relationship.
Yes. Yeah. So much of this happens on social media. It happens on cable news, and the volume gets turned up so much that it's easy for us to lose the we the people part of it, and to be divided into all of the little subgroups. And then it becomes so easy to approach others from the point of guilt and shame and judgment. And I just ask you think about the last time you changed.
My clothes?
The last time you had a shift in your thinking, in your behavior, was it because someone shamed you? Was it because someone guilt-tripped you? Was it because someone won an argument with you? Not usually, right? It's love and relationship. I have a friend who says that truth travels best on the road of relationships.
Amen.
I commend, this is a little pre-joke here. I commend to you the Apostle Paul, who said, you'll see Jeff Sessions say that. But the Apostle Paul said in Romans that it is God's kindness that leads to repentance. And that's the way it happens, right? It's kindness, it's love, it's grace, it's relationship, it's listening, it's empathy. All of those things are the things that bring about change. Now, it usually doesn't happen quickly.
No.
And it's complicated.
Yes.
And there's no guarantee.
Correct.
And it would just be a lot easier if I could win this argument and my mom would vote the way I want her to vote.
Totally.
But instead, she's my mom, and I got to figure out how to love and be in relationship with my Trump-supporting mom.
Correct. That's easy.
No, it's not.
Alicia, we talk about the shared struggle of the whole question of faith and democracy and what does it mean to be a we the people. And embedded in that struggle, it seems that there's three areas that the struggle really starts to pinpoint. Mm-hmm. Power, boundaries, and order. Mm-hmm. And the struggle isn't only sort of interpersonal, but it also starts to play out where some people are going to have power and some people aren't. This is the binary nature of elections and of governance and of decisions and of votes. Some win, some lose, some have more power.
Elections have consequences.
Mm-hmm. Whose order of the world are we going to have? So there's a lot at risk. Any thoughts on this thing about power, boundaries, and order when it comes to the struggle of all this? Do you just have any thoughts about it? I know all this is new and you're not.
Yeah, no.
And it's not a pop quiz or anything.
Right. This is the yes and moment playing out in live time. 3 areas of struggle: power, boundaries, and order. So this word power is always fascinating to me because we use it so colloquially and we know that words matter, right? And so I acknowledge that in common parlance, a lot of us talk about who has power, right? And oftentimes when I think about our government and some of the historicity of it, that it's not actually power that is at play, it is force. It is force, right? Because true power, in my estimation, and hey, I'm a Baptist. You don't have to believe me. Think for yourselves, right? Be critical. Think for yourselves on this. But for me, power is something that comes from something greater, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas force is something that creates distinctions, oppression, othering, that sort of thing. And I think that that is what we can often be liable to, right?
Yep.
So I just look at that word power, and that word I acknowledge in front of you and in front of everyone else is kind of problematic. It's fraught for me because so often I see our government acting with force, with militarism, right? With threat, with what we're talking about right now, what we're having this conversation about, the imposition of religion on the public square.
Yep. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. We're going to continue our conversation in a couple of ways. You're going to now meet Clay. Clay wrote a song called Does God? Now, we just met Clay, Ohio's own, by the way.
Yes, indeed.
Yesterday was the first time we actually met in person. So Clay is the newest member to our group at the same time as Beth, who also joined us yesterday and just joining us. Now, Clay lives here in Ohio, so that one was easy. But Beth, she lives way over in Albuquerque and in the San Francisco Bay Area. Wait till you figure out all this. I mean, just interesting after interesting around here, right? Well, Clay wrote a song that my wife heard on Spotify, liked it so much, she sent it to me about 1.5 years ago. And then we rediscovered it a couple of months ago and reached out to Clay. And all of a sudden I'm like, you know, Clay is like a doppelganger of Dan, that guy that wrote that other song, and then Clay writes this song, and then in a few minutes you're going to meet the third doppelganger that we met a couple of weeks ago in North Carolina named Joel, that's going to sit there, and he also has a song. It's like late 30s, early 40s sad dad song guys are all over this stuff, and it's fantastic, and we love it. So Clay, so good for you to join us, and he's taken this song too, and what I love about it, is it not only for people for whom the faith part of this conversation means a lot. Clay's song, I think, really asks us to consider, could we reconsider our understanding of our faith or even of God? And maybe that's the place to start. For some people, the faith and democracy question starts with democracy. For some people, it starts in reconsidering their faith. Maybe the faith they hold needs to be a little bit different. So anyway, Clay, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. Yeah. I told Doug this afternoon that if he was going for diversity with his musician lineup tonight, he failed miserably. Yeah, we are all late 30s or early 40s white guys with 3 children apiece who write songs about our evangelical upbringing. So sorry about that. Yeah, Doug introed my song better than I could, but you can copy and paste Dan's introduction to his song for me. And when the election happened in 2016, I too wrote an album, and at the end of writing that album, I just felt like it was so full of sadness and heartbreak and lament that I wanted to write something hopeful. And as my faith evolved and changed, I had a million questions about what is God, who is God, and all of these things, but the thing that I kept clinging to was I kept seeing the divinity of God in the people around me. And that included people that, my upbringing looked down upon and thought less than. My wife is a multiple disabilities elementary school teacher. And I started to truly see the divinity of God in her students. I started to see that in my gay uncles, Russ and Gus, who are real people who I mentioned in the song. It's not a cheap rhyme. They are real people, Russ and Gus. And I started to see it in the men and women that we locked in cages, and the list could go on. And so this song was the best I could do to articulate all those things. It's called Does God? Does God have a face? Does he have a body or even a name? If he does he know that I'm alive. Is God even here? Does she care that I doubt? Does she care that I fear? Something tells me God will survive. So take a breath, breathe it in, the mystery that is there. The universe we don't know. I think the truth is, if God has a face, his face must look like yours. Did God kill his kid? Did he have to have blood before he would forgive? Or maybe we made a God that looks like us. Does God know my name? Is the ache in my soul just confined to my brain? Even so, does that mean it's not real? So take a breath, breathe it in, the mystery that is this. The universe we don't know, but I think the truth is, if God has a face, her face must look like yours. A face like a Tina, an Ahmed or Mildred, a Ross and his husband, Gus and their children. A face like a Kim, a Ted or Tyrone, a Lucy born with an extra chromosome, a Pablo with legs he can't move by himself, a girl born a Daniel who now is Danielle, a Bill H. and Ye, even white guys named Todd. If you have a heartbeat, you are the face of God. So take a breath and breathe it in, the mystery that is this. A universe we don't know, but I think the truth is, if God has a face, her face must look. If God has a face, his face must look. If God has a face, the face it must be yours. Thank you, Ben.
Right?
So when Joel, who you'll meet in a couple of minutes, who has a shockingly different story, by the way, when Joel joined the bus, I started calling him New Dan and calling Dan Old Dan. And now Clay is with us, and newer Dan? I don't know. So
Dan squared?
Dan, yeah, something like that. So we're talking about this idea of how do we live out our faith? What role does our faith play in the midst of a democratic society, a pluralistic, secular society, Think about how we do that as faith leaders and people of faith. But there's other people who've got to figure this out too, and that's the politicians. Now, people who are involved in politics, they've got to navigate this as well. And you might know that some of our work at Vote Common Good is about this kind of thing, helping people of faith navigate these things and have vocabulary for it and figure it out. Part of our work is also helping candidates for office. And we do that in a variety of ways. We do rallies, we do events, we do trainings, we do support and all sorts of stuff. And we do that work as well. And one of the things, whenever I get talking to people about this, sometimes they get a little nervous because the only thing they can imagine is the approach the religious right takes. And I often will say, listen, we're not trying to take America back for liberal Jesus. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to do something different. We're not trying to get Christian Democrats elected to office. We're actually agnostic about the faith of the candidates we work with. We're trying to get Christian voters to behave differently than they have in the past. Does that make sense? So we're not trying to get Christian Democrats elected to office, with one exception.
What exception would that be, Rob?
Jerrad Christian,
Unless
who's running for office.
There's one person named Jerrad Christian that we want to be in office. And sorry for the double entendre.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Tammy is here. Tammy Wilson is also running. Tammy, are you here?
Thanks.
So
talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've had a chance to meet Jerrad yet. Jerrad is running for Congress here in your district. Jerrad is running to be your congressman. But we're not going to talk about all that. This is not a political speech. We're going to talk about how do we navigate this stuff? How do we figure this out of how to be a leader who has faith of some kind, a moral compass of some kind, and yet wants to represent people who have all sorts of different approaches. I don't know. What, off the top of your head, what do you think? You got this figured out, Jerrad? You got this solved?
I have it all solved. It was a problem, not a predicament.
Yeah. There's a problem. I have a solution. Yeah. See me at the table.
Yeah. We'll talk after. It is a difficult thing to navigate. I myself, I don't have long hair anymore or a beard, but you should have seen me at COVID. I was also a Dan clone.
We would like to hear the songs you wrote.
Yeah. No, you wouldn't.
How sad can you go, Jerrad?
Yeah. It was COVID times. What was your question?
How do you just top line? How do you begin to think about navigating, like how you represent people who have different approaches to this? You know, you're running to be the representative of the people of Ohio's 12th congressional district, some of which are in this room and have one approach, and there might be another church in town having a meeting tonight that has with people that have a very different, that have a Christian nationalist approach. How do I navigate that?
I think that at the core of every good human is the same answer. We care as individuals, and your political background doesn't matter. I think that we, the people, care about our children, about the world that they inherit, about the foundations that we build as people, upon which they will build their homes and the future of society. We care about clean water, clean air, the ability to have a good career that we can be proud of. So I think that no matter your approach to your faith, our goals are all aligned. And I think that those who aren't aligned with that are usually the very wealthy with extremely big megaphones that are very good at being loud. So I would piggyback off what you said earlier about us as a society, us good people trying to do good things, that we, especially now, when it is the hardest, is to stand up against those who don't reflect your faith, your goodness, and be loud and unafraid, because that is the only way that we move forward.
Jerrad, for a lot of voters, unfortunately, religion is a stand-in for being a good person.
Sure.
In the United States, we love a hero, villain, victim narrative. Our stories are based on it, our shows, the books we read, the way we think of ourselves, and most often we almost always find a way to cast ourselves as the character of the hero. Occasionally the victim, but the victim who could become the hero, that's the best. Rarely do we see ourselves as the villain. So we villainize others, and so often our religion helps us see that we're a good person. And it's probably really important to us to find some way to see ourselves as doing good. But what that means for a lot of people is that when they meet someone of a different political party, they immediately think, well, you're not a good person. And a lot of voters who are going to make a decision about voting for you are going to ask you, are you a good person? And the stand-in is, which party are you a part of? And what religion do you hold to? That is very rudimentary. We know it doesn't reflect the reality. But how do you respond to it when you have so many people who've been conditioned to just believe that Christian Republicans are good people and the godless Democrats are therefore baseless and immoral? What do you do with it? Because I'm guessing you hear it. And if you don't, they're saying it behind your back. But I'm guessing they say it right to you sometimes, and you're pretty aware of what they think.
Believe it or not, they do say it to my face.
I do believe it.
I was raised Pentecostal. I was raised as an anti-disestablishmentarian.
Thank you for that. That's awesome.
Callback.
So, I was raised Republican. I'm from middle of nowhere, Appalachia, Ohio. And the people of that region, they have a set of beliefs that they abide by, that they build the foundations of their lives on. And people ask me oftentimes, like, why did I become a Democrat over a Republican? And the answer is that right now, the Democrats are the people who are loving their neighbors, who are lifting other people up, who are welcoming the stranger. And it is easy to cast yourself as the hero, the main character of this whole story. That's a really easy pattern to fall in. But throughout my life, I have taken stock of myself and who I am at any given point. And when I find a piece of myself that I no longer am in love with, I leave it behind.
Nice.
And I think that if we can have these conversations with other people that make them recognize the humanity in me and in themselves, because it's easy just to be this machine of anger and hate and disappointment and sadness and fear. But to remember at our basis who we are is a person who ultimately wants to love and be loved. If we can communicate that, that's how we get this message out.
Thank you for that. We have a call within our work with candidates of common good that we ask them to conduct themselves in a way of love as they're in service to the country, and that's something that again is more of a predicament than a simple problem.
We'll talk after.
It's hard to know what loving looks like. Knowing that you will represent people of many different religions, how does a representative government respond to so many kinds of people? How do you, all this predicament we find ourselves in, like what can someone who's driving around saying, hey, this isn't a game of balderdash here, this is a game of we should really have a real, representative that represents everybody. How do you possibly do it? How do you think about representing everyone from such a diverse background and desires? How does one do it?
I think that first and foremost, I represent the ideas and the ideals of this nation, of freedom. That's the main thing. is that we are all Americans and we all have the expectation of freedom. And if your faith doesn't tell you to be a good person and to care about your neighbor and to care about your children and the future of this society, then, I mean, maybe I won't be the best representative for you. So it all boils down to our shared humanity and wanting the same end.
Thank you.
Common good. The answer's common good.
Common good.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what I said.
So in the same way that we had Pastor Alicia respond to a pastor kind of explaining his approach, kind of had her response to that, we want to show you a video of a political leader, someone who was elected senator from the state of Alabama, and then served as Secretary of State, right? Attorney General. Thank you. Appreciate that. Trying to block all this out. This is Jeff Sessions. Let's watch this, and then Jerrad, why don't I get your response to this?
Yeah, now this short little clip you're about to see is Jeff Sessions explaining why the Trump administration is invoking family separation policy, which was intended to punish people who came to the United States with children seeking asylum and crossed the border or approached a border patrol agent without an appointment. And the punishment was going to be, we will separate you from your children as an act of deterrence.
Yep. And notice that he is standing at a podium with the Department of Justice logo on the front. This is not Jeff Sessions acting in his personal capacity.
Right.
This is him acting in his capacity as Attorney General.
And he says this.
Due to the Apostle Paul and his clear and wise command in Romans 13 to obey the laws of the government, because God has ordained the government for his purposes. Orderly and lawful processes are good in themselves. Consistent, fair application of law is in itself a good and moral thing, and that protects the weak. It protects the lawful. Our policies that can result in short-term separation of families is not unusual or unjustified.
So I will just say, yes, it is unusual. Yes, it is unjustified. Yes, it is immoral from my particular opinion. I invite you to consider that opinion for yourself. But he begins this, Jerrad, as the Attorney General of the United States, Chief Law Enforcement Officer, describing the United States' lawful position by saying, I commend to you the Apostle Paul in Romans 13, that God has ordained the government, so you should follow the laws of the government. What does a candidate like you do when this is an environment where many of the constituents that you could represent are applauding that kind of thing and not speaking out against it?
First of all, the irony of him talking about applying the justice system equally across the board right now, especially with the SCOTUS decision recently to grant the president immunity. Two, that makes me really upset.
Yeah.
That man is taking his faith and applying his hate and disdain for other people using what he's disguising as love for other people. It is fair and just to harm these people because we would do it to anybody who crosses the border. I mean, just that thought alone strikes me as you're saying you're going to apply the law equally across the board, but the only people you can do that to are the people you're doing it to.
Wow.
So where's the equality there?
Wow. Thank you. Well, and by the way, when our organization invited people running for Congress or for any public position to go with us to the border, which is something we do, we spend a lot of time on the border. We've done a bike ride from San Diego, California to St. Augustine, Florida, along the U.S.-Mexico border, every mile of it, to make a documentary about it. By the way, we're looking to finish that documentary in the next couple of months, so if any of you are looking to be a producer to finish out a documentary, we have a great opportunity for you. It's called the We the People Ride. And it asked the questions, who are the we the people? And we met a lot of folks along the way on both sides of the border, and so we've started inviting people running for Congress to go with us to meet people in asylum camps and those working on the border, border patrol agents and others, Jerrad said yes and went with us down to the border a couple of weeks ago. So he's somebody who says yes, and you can count me in on that. So thank you for going.
Yeah,
thank you for
setting it
caring
up.
about this. That we're not just talking about policy on this topic.
Yeah.
These are people, and Jerrad has been there and has sat with them and has cried with asylum seekers who can't get into this country because our laws are broken.
I didn't cry, you cried.
Yeah, that's right.
We all cried. Can I rant about Jeff Sessions for a minute?
Please. Somebody has to.
Jeff Sessions is suggesting that a couple of things. He's suggesting that God ordains government, and therefore what the government does, people need to obey. It's almost as if he's suggesting that government has moral immunity. That like any law that God ordained us, and we made this law, so it's God ordained too, right? Do you catch that? It makes me wonder if Jeff Sessions celebrates the 4th of July.
Ponder that this evening.
Because our country, are you with me on this? Yeah. If God ordains government, and government can basically do no wrong, as Jeff Sessions seems to be suggesting, then the American Revolution was sinful. Right? Yeah. So, I don't know. These are the things. This keeps me up at night.
I was going to say, how do any of us sleep well? Jerrad, thank you. Thank you for running. Thank you for being a part of this. We appreciate hearing from you. Before we get to all of you and what do you all think about this as average people, I will introduce you here to Joel. Joel has written a song that we heard just the other day for the first time. Now, Joel, we met in North Carolina at a thing called the Wild Goose Festival and was part of the band there, and we were there, and we started talking about the work we do and what he does, and we're like, hey, you ever think about climbing in a bus? So the other day from Syracuse, New York, he and his family, wife, and the 3 kids, which they all have, they come as a package deal, 3 kids drove down, met us in Pennsylvania, got on the bus, and has been with us, and then is going to go back home, and then we're going to go to Michigan next week, and he might be back for that. So we're gathering people up. All of that is preamble to us recruiting all of you to get on the bus. So that is coming, so just get ready and start writing your songs as well. Tell us a little bit about this song, because it seems to fit in this whole same question of what do we do about all this?
Yeah. I have a hat, so that's how I'm different. Yes. So I was raised in very much like Jerrad, in Eastern Washington, somewhere between the Duggars and the Amish, somewhere in there. Yeah. Hence the hat. Should have shaved my mustache. And so being around here feels very, this whole area, kind of the suburban out of Columbus area, feels very at home to me, the farmland and all that. And several years ago, well, I don't need to tell it, you've already both told my story. So 2016 obviously happened, and that shifted a lot of things for probably everybody in this room. And so I wrote this song probably 2 or 3 years ago now, and I'm kind of just trying to subvert some of these ideas of that we grew up with. If you grew up in church, you probably grew up singing a hymn called "Faith of My Fathers." I think it was an old Lutheran hymn, "Faith of my fathers, holy faith." And so I thought, what if I write songs that have the title of an old hymn, but just subvert that whole message and give us a different take on it? Because I don't know about you, there are a lot of my fathers that I don't want their faith. Yeah. And I've had to, this is a primarily white audience, and I have had to tweak this a little bit, because I've also recognized if I'm singing this for a black audience, they're going to receive this differently, because there's probably a faith of their fathers that they very much do want to hold on to, and actually it's their fathers that I want to be more like. But this song's meant to be offensive, and it's meant to make you think. So this is me turning a hymn upside down, and Clay's going to sing with me, and he's an amazing singer, so I'm asked him to join me. We've never even really practiced this, so here we go. I don't want the faith of my fathers that bombs, segregates, and enslaves.
uses scripture as a weapon. If you're a woman, immigrant, or gay, I don't want the faith of my mothers silent while men hang from a tree. I see in Christ a clear reflection, a love beyond our wildest dreams. Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. Would you sing that with me? Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly, walk humbly with your God. I want the faith of Moses, the kind that sets the captive free. I want the faith of Naomi, lifting the ones who are weak. I want the faith of Mary, holding the mystery deep inside. But most of all, I want the faith of Jesus and His grace, turning darkness into light. Down through the ages we've seen it, religion turning into hate, becoming a partner for violence, war and steal and take and take. But when I read of the God of love, who rescues even enemies, there's something in me that rises up. Come be that hope in me. I want the faith of Joseph, forgiving those who do me wrong. I want the faith of Hannah, turning my grieving into song. I want the faith of Deborah, leading a nation out of shame. But most of all, I want to run to see your kingdom come, rolling the stone of death away. Sing with me. Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. I want the faith of Esther, confronting hate, not backing down. I want the faith of Tamar, the courage to speak the truth to power. I want the faith of Hagar, naming the God who sees and hears. But most of all, I want to be like Jesus was for me, the love that's casting out all fear. Oh, I want the faith of Martin, naming the dream as though it was. I may not get there with you, no, most of all, I wanna be like the one who died for me, the love that's making all things new. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Just a couple guys we picked up along the way. Look, people are singing new songs all over. People that 5 or 10 years ago never would have thought they'd be sitting in a room singing that. There's new songs to sing. There's new places to go. There's new people to meet. By the way, thanks for having a piano in here. So I don't know, whoever pays to have the piano tuned, we appreciate it. Thank you. It means a lot to us. You can't bring a piano in the bus. You can bring a keyboard, but it's not the same as a piano. Okay, so thank you. We've got a couple of minutes left here. We try to be done by 8, so we only got a couple of minutes left for y'all. This is our y'all moment. What does a citizen, how do citizens respond to the issue? And that's the time for y'all. Who's got a thought for us? How do you see this? We know there's extroverts in the crowd that have been sitting here for almost 2 hours not being able to say a word, or leaning over to people next to you and talking the whole time, and they're like, shh. We know that. We're those people. Who's got something to share? Please, thank you.
My thoughts are, one thing I've gathered from this is we have to quit being the Tesla, and we have to actually start speaking out and be the loud motorcycle. I mean, we do. We do. We just, but we have to do it also with another thing that I picked up through this conversation. We have to do it with love. I mean, that's the best way. I've been on this earth 67 years, and you think if you're going to come at somebody 180 mile an hour, it doesn't work as well if you come at them at 40 mile an hour and try to reason with them.
Nice.
So,
Jay, thank you. Thanks for being willing to share your voice.
Jay.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Candace, and I just want to say that knowledge is power. By coming to things like this, we learn. And also, I believe that democracy and faith both are about action. You know, you have to get out there in the trenches and talk to people. I'm involved with a group called North Think Tank on Poverty, and we do voter registration. We put up a table at the grocery store. You know, there's a lot of people that don't know that they can vote. If you are a felon in Ohio, you can vote. You might not be able to get a job or housing, but you can vote. But I mean, some people don't know that, or just some people don't vote because they think their vote doesn't count. So I just think that things like this just helps us gain knowledge, and knowledge is power.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Candace. Thank you.
In our world, we have a little saying that comes from my friend Tessa's grandma. Her grandma said to her, you don't do nothing, you do something. And everybody's got a little something. Grocery stores, buses, showing up, saying hi to your neighbor. Walk down the street here to the Turkish coffee place, and next door, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a person I think might be supporting the former president, an insurrection leader. And then right next to Ted's house, there's a Vote Common Good, Faith, Hope, and Love sign sitting there. Thank you, Marcia, for having that sign. Sometimes just living next to your neighbor and going with a more classy type font on your sign is a thing you can do. So thank you, Marcia. We appreciate you doing that.
Yeah.
We've all got us something.
Somebody else?
All right, well, we do have a last thing we'd love you to... Oh, yeah, we got one more. Okay. Hey, you know...
Two more.
We're at time, but we like to think about this like the love of God in a public bus in Guatemala. Always time for one more. So.
Well, I just was going to say, it's hard for me to be brave about talking to people or even making phone calls or canvassing. Oh, my God. But I did read somebody the other day wrote, you know, it's 100 days or less now. Can we pull ourselves out of whatever fear we have for just 100 days? Because it might make a really big difference.
Thank you,
Well said, Patty. Thank you.
100 days for democracy.
I've been being driven crazy by the political and environmental situation for several years. And it reached the point where it was really turning me into a kind of person that I didn't want to be. And I was angry and afraid, and I had to find some way around that. And I did that by realizing that the Christian nationalists and the people who represent those ideas are angry and afraid too.
Yeah.
And they're erecting those boundaries because the world is a complicated and scary and difficult place.
Nice.
And if we can reach out, if we can recognize that in each other and treat that challenge the way we try to treat other challenges in our lives, that there's a lot of hope there. And I'm working with that.
Well said. Thank you.
Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, I just a couple of final encouragements. One is if you'd be willing, we'd love for you to go to voteCommonGood.com. We have a little thing on there to sign up on our email list. We'd love to stay in touch because we're coming back to Ohio, and we'd love to do some other things with you. We do these kinds of events, we do these outdoor events. We're just coming up with stuff because you got to do something. You can't do nothing. So if you're up over the next 100 days, we're going to be back a few times. We'd love to stay in touch. Don't worry, we're not going to email you twice a week. We're not a group like that. We send 4 emails a week. We really do. So we're going to do 4 times. We're not here to love you and leave you. We want to stay in touch and make this a relationship where we keep up with each other. You can read them if you want, but we want to introduce you to people and have you hear stories. One of our stories that's going on now that we did a video is about Ted and Marcia. I didn't name names, but showed the houses. People love seeing neighbors with each other. I want to share with you stories like happened to us on Sunday. We were doing an event in Pennsylvania, and the campaign had suggested a particular restaurant that had closed in the parking lot, and they thought we were going to check with the owner. We thought they were going to check with the owner. Nobody checked with the owner. We pulled up, set up our bus, a bunch of chairs, faith, hope, and love signs, had candidates running as Democratic candidates in this parking lot. The owner pulls up in his truck, gets out, he walks up. I didn't know he was the owner, but I walked up to him and said, "Hey, how you doing?" He goes, "What's going on here? Who are you people? What are you doing? This is my parking lot." I said, "Well, did you not know we were coming?" He said, "No, I didn't know you were coming. I'm a Trump-supporting, gun-toting," his words, gun-toting, truck-driving, conservative Christian. Pack up and get out of here. I said, "Okay, we'll pack up." And he said, "Well, you're already all set up, aren't you?" He said, "Is she running as a Democrat or as a Republican?" I said, "She's running as a Democrat," the sign that was there, the yard sign. He said, "Well, is she here? Could I meet her?" I said, "Sure." So I walked over, introduced, said, "This is the owner." He didn't know we were coming. He's kind enough to say we can stay. Chris let us stay. Ran the whole thing. He's out mowing the lawn of the property. At the end, I went up to him and paid him as we would have if we'd ever asked him to use his parking lot. I had 2 beers in my hand, and I said, "Chris, I have 2 beers for you. You can have them both, or if you'd be up for it, I'd love to share one." He goes, "I'd love to share one with you." So he pulled up next to our bus. We sat under the awning and talked for about 15 minutes about why he's moving to South Carolina because he doesn't like the politics in Pennsylvania anymore, and what's going on, and the illness that he had and that his wife has, and why they're moving, how he feels like religion's pulling people apart and should put them together, and he wishes it was different, and this isn't the country, and he started talking about what Tom was talking about how he's afraid. And here a Trump-supporting person let us have one of our rallies in his property. And I wondered if I would do that. I wonder if it was my property and a bunch of Christian nationalist Trumpers pulled up. Would I have let him stay? And all of a sudden I started thinking about what a good Samaritan looks like in our day. We want to share with you stories like that because they keep happening. They're all over. We want to share with you stories of people who 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago had one story and now they're living in another one. Because we need a little bit of common good hope. But thank you. We're going to applaud for you. Thank you for being here and thank you for being a